What a crazy story, folks. Let's take a trip back in time, way back to the year 1500. When the Portuguese sailors first landed on the beautiful shores of what would become Brazil, they didn't find any local money. The indigenous people who lived here had a different system, trading goods like colorful feathers, strong wood, and delicious foods. There was no need for little metal discs. But the Portuguese explorers brought their own money with them, coins from far away in Portugal. These were called and for a long time, these foreign coins were the only ones you could find in Brazil. It was like going to the store with money from another country, which must have been very confusing for everyone at first. As the colony of Brazil grew bigger and more important, especially with the discovery of huge amounts of gold and diamonds, things started to change. Portugal realized it needed more coins right here in Brazil to keep the economy moving. Sending money all the way from Europe on slow, dangerous ships was just not practical. So they decided to start making coins in Brazil itself. The very first Brazilian mint or coin factory was opened in Salvador, Bahia, way back in 1694. This was a huge deal. For the first time, coins were being made on Brazilian soil using Brazilian gold. These early coins were often called provincial coins, and they were a massive step towards Brazil having its own financial identity. These first colonial coins were true works of art, but they were also very practical. They were heavy, made of real gold and silver, and had the symbols of the Portuguese king stamped on them. This was to show everyone who was in charge. You would see the royal crown, the cross of the Order of Christ, and other symbols that screamed Portugal. The designs were often very detailed, sometimes showing a globe to represent Portugal's vast empire across the seas. Because they were made from precious metals found right here, like the gold from Portuguese Réis, these coins were valuable not just for what they could buy, but for the very material they were made from. It was the beginning of Brazil's long and fascinating journey with its own money. So for nearly 300 years, the money in Brazil was Portuguese money, just made locally. The names remained the same, the king's face was on the front, and the value was tied to the Portuguese Empire. But using local gold and silver to make these coins planted a small seed of independence. It showed that Brazil had the resources and the ability to manage its own wealth. This era of colonial coins, with their heavy weight and royal symbols, perfectly captures the story of early Brazil, a land rich in resources, but still under the control of a distant European power. It was a period of growth and wealth, but the real story of Brazilian money was just getting started. Alright, let's fast forward a bit. The year is 1822 and Brazil declares its independence from Portugal. Woohoo! A new country was born, the Empire of Brazil. And what does a new empire need? You got it, its own money. It was time to say goodbye to the faces of Portuguese kings and hello to our very own emperors. Dom Pedro I, the first emperor of Brazil, wanted to make it clear that Brazil was now its own boss. So, the mints in Rio de Janeiro, Bahia, and other places started producing brand new coins. These coins were a powerful symbol of our newfound freedom, a way to show the world and our own people that we were a proud and independent nation with our own ruler. The designs of these imperial coins were completely different from the old colonial ones. Instead of the Portuguese coat of arms, the new coins proudly displayed the Brazilian imperial coat of arms, with its coffee and tobacco branches representing our agricultural strength. And, of course, the portrait of the emperor was front and center. First, we had Dom Pedro I and later his son, Dom Pedro II, who ruled for a very long time. Seeing the emperor's face on the money every day reminded people of their new leader and their new Brazilian identity. The coins were still made of precious metals like gold, silver, and copper, but now they told a Brazilian story, not a Portuguese one. The main currency during the empire was still called the same name from colonial times, but everyone knew it was now Brazilian. The coins came in many different values, from small copper coins for everyday shopping to large, beautiful silver and gold coins for bigger transactions. These gold coins, often called coronation pieces, were especially impressive and are now highly sought after by collectors. They were not just money, they were symbols of the wealth and stability of the new empire. Having a strong, reliable currency helped Brazil establish itself as a serious player on the world stage during the 19th century. During the long and peaceful reign of Dom Pedro II, the coins became even more standardized and refined. The minting technology improved, so the coins looked more professional and uniform. with sharper details and more complex designs. This period really solidified Brazil's monetary system. The imperial coins tell the story of a nation finding its footing, building its institutions, and growing in confidence. They represent a time of monarchy, of grand balls and coffee plantations, a Brazil that was proud, stable, and looking towards a bright future. But as we all know, empires don't last forever, and another big change for our money was just around the corner. Now folks, get ready for a wild ride. The period from the 1930s to the early 1990s was like a financial roller coaster for Brazil. The main problem was something called inflation. Imagine if the price of a loaf of bread went up every single day. Soon, you'd need a whole wheelbarrow of cash just to buy breakfast. That's what high inflation does. The money loses its value very, very quickly. For decades, Brazil's economy struggled with this monster. As prices soared, the numbers on the money got bigger and bigger until they became almost ridiculous. A simple purchase could cost thousands or even millions of the currency unit. To deal with this chaos, the government had to perform what was essentially a monetary reset over and over again. This is called a currency reform. Think of it like this: when the numbers get too big and confusing, you just chop off a few zeros and give the money a new name. For example, if something cost 1,000 old units, after a reform, it might cost just one new unit. This made calculations easier and helped restore a little bit of confidence, at least for a while. However, if the root causes of inflation weren't fixed, the whole cycle would just start all over again. And that's exactly what happened in Brazil for many years. This constant change was reflected directly in the coins. The designs and materials changed rapidly, often out of necessity. As inflation made the metal in a coin more valuable than its face value, people would melt the coins down to sell the metal. Can you believe it? The government had to react by making coins out of cheaper and cheaper materials, moving from copper and bronze to aluminum and eventually stainless steel. The coins became lighter and less impressive. It was a clear sign of an unstable economy. Each new currency name brought a new series of coins, which would often become worthless in just a few years. This era is a powerful lesson in economics. It shows how a country's political and economic stability is directly linked to the money in people's pockets. The dizzying succession of currencies, from the old to various versions of the and the, tells a story of struggle, of economic plans that didn't work, and of a nation trying to find its way out of a very difficult situation. For Brazilians who lived through these times, it was a period of great uncertainty. The coins from this era are a physical reminder of that economic turbulence, a testament to the resilience of the Brazilian people who had to adapt to new money all the time. Let's break down this confusing time a little more. It's a real soap opera of money. The currency that replaced the old reis in 1942 was called the Cruzeiro. This was a big deal, a modern name for a modernizing country. The first Cruzeiro coins featured Brazilian heroes, maps, and symbols of our industry and agriculture. For a while things were stable, but then that monster called inflation came back with a vengeance. By the 1960s, the Cruzeiro had lost so much value that the government had to cut 3 zeros and create the Cruzeiro Novo, or New Cruzeiro, in 1967. It was the same soap opera, just with a new episode. The story continued. The Cruzeiro Novo eventually dropped the Novo and became just the Cruzeiro again, but inflation kept roaring. By the 1980s, we were dealing with hyperinflation, where prices could double in a single month. The government tried another big reform in 1986, launching the Cruzado. Once again, they cut 3 zeros off the price tags. People were hopeful, but the economic problems were deep. The Cruzado also fell victim to inflation, and soon it was followed by the Cruzado Novo in 1989. Another 3 zeros gone. It was a dizzying cycle of new names and disappearing zeros that left everyone's head spinning. The cycle wasn't over yet, believe it or not. In 1990, the country went back to the name Cruzeiro. It was like a reunion tour for a band that nobody really wanted to see again. This third version of the Cruzeiro also failed to tame inflation. The coins from this period were made of stainless steel, were very simple, and didn't last long in circulation before they were worth almost nothing. Then, in a final brief attempt before the big solution, the government introduced the Cruzeiro Real in 1993, lopping off another 3 zeros. It was clear that just changing the name and cutting zeros wasn't working. Brazil needed a real, deep and intelligent plan, And then came the hero of our story, the Plano Real in 1994. This was more than just a currency change. It was a complete economic stabilization plan. The new currency was named the Real, a clever name that means both royal and real in Portuguese. It connected to Brazil's very first currency, the Reis, but also signaled a new era of stability and reality. The transition was smart. First, they introduced a temporary accounting unit called the URV, which got people used to the new values before the actual money was released. When the Real was finally launched on July 1st, 1994, it worked. Inflation was finally brought under control, and a new era of economic predictability began for Brazil. Have you ever wondered where all these shiny coins actually come from? They don't just magically appear in cash registers. In Brazil, there is one special place responsible for producing all of our money, both coins and banknotes. It's called the Casa da Moeda do Brasil, which translates to the Brazilian Mint. Located in Rio de Janeiro, this high-tech facility is like a giant super-secure factory for money. It has a long and proud history, tracing its roots all the way back to the first mint in colonial Bahia. Today, it uses modern technology and very strict security to create the billions of coins we use every single day. It's a massive operation. The process of making a coin is pretty fascinating. It all starts with huge rolls or sheets of metal, like stainless steel, brass or copper. These sheets are fed into a powerful machine that punches out blank discs, which are called planches. These planches are then heated to make them soft, a process called annealing, and then they are washed and polished until they shine. The next step is the most important one, striking. The shiny blank planches are fed into a coining press. This machine holds two dies, which are like super strong stamps with the coin's design engraved on them, one for the front or obverse and one for the back or reverse. The press strikes the planche with incredible force, instantly imprinting the designs from the dies onto both sides of the coin. At the same exact moment, a collar around the planche creates the smooth or reeded edge. It all happens in a fraction of a second. For bimetallic coins like our one Real, the process is even more complex, as the inner and outer rings have to be locked together perfectly during the strike. After being struck, the new coins are inspected for any imperfections. Quality control is extremely strict to ensure every coin meets the standard. Finally, they are counted and bagged, ready to be sent out across this enormous country. But who decides how many coins to make and what they should look like? That's the job of the Banco Central do Brasil, or the Central Bank of Brazil. The central bank is the brain of our financial system. It manages the country's economy, controls inflation, and is responsible for issuing our currency. They are the ones who commission the designs for new coins, decide when to release commemorative editions, and tell the Casa da Moeda how many coins of each denomination are needed to keep the economy running smoothly. They make sure you have coins to get change at the bakery, and that the entire financial system is healthy and stable. Okay, so we know coins are used for buying things, but for some people, they are so much more than that. They are tiny treasures, and collecting them is a huge hobby all around the world. This hobby is called numismatics, which is a fancy word for the study or collection of currency. Coin collectors, or numismatists, look for coins that are rare, old, beautiful, or have an interesting story behind them. A simple coin that you might have in your pocket could be a special treasure to a collector, especially if it's a rare one. It's like a treasure hunt where the treasure can be found in your own change. What makes a coin valuable to a collector? It's not always about being made of gold or silver. One of the biggest factors is rarity. For example, some coins were minted in very small quantities, or maybe a mistake was made during minting, creating a rare error coin. The 1998 one Real coin with the letter P on it, which indicates it was a test or prova coin, is very rare and valuable. Condition is also super important. A coin that looks brand new, with no scratches, is called uncirculated or flor de cunho in Portuguese, and it's worth much more than a worn-out one that has been passed around for years. Brazilian coins are fantastic for collectors because our history is so rich and full of changes. You can build a collection that tells the entire story of Brazil. You could focus on the heavy gold coins from the colonial era, the elegant silver coins from the empire with Dom Pedro II's face, or the beautiful Liberty coins from the Old Republic. Or, you could try to collect all the different coins from the chaotic period of inflation. A real challenge. Even modern coins can be collectible, like the full set of the Rio 2016 Olympics coins. These themed collections are a wonderful way to engage with history on a personal level. This hobby is not just about hoarding old objects, it's about preserving history. Each coin is a small, durable artifact that has survived for years, sometimes centuries. It has passed through thousands of hands and witnessed countless moments in history. When you hold an old coin, you are holding a direct connection to the past. Collectors are like curators of a mini museum. They study the history behind each coin, catalog them, and take care of them so that future generations can also learn from them. It's a fantastic way to learn about art, economics, and the history of our amazing country, Brazil.